Lucas Donovan's life had nearly sunk into despair after the accident left him unable to move, but Amelia, a single mother, appeared, determined to help him recover. Before we begin the story, comment below what the country you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone! The sunlight filtered softly through the sheer curtains, casting delicate golden streaks across the hospital room. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, sharp and sterile. Lucas Donovan, once a titan of the corporate world and a household name for his ruthless business acumen, stared blankly at the ceiling. He felt like a ghost trapped inside his own body. 6 months ago, the car accident had stolen his freedom. The doctors called it a miracle that he survived, but Lucas didn't see any miracle in a life where his leg refused to move, where his body betrayed him daily. His world, once defined by power and movement, was now confined to a chair and the cold metal bars of his hospital bed. "Mr. Donovan!" A crisp voice interrupted his thoughts. It belonged to Dr. Rachel Evans, a no-nonsense physician who had treated him since the accident. She adjusted her glasses and gave him a professional, detached smile. "Your home rehabilitation begins today. Your new caregiver will be here shortly." Lucas didn't reply. He had stopped caring about routines, treatments, and the endless revolving door of therapists. Nothing changed. Nothing ever would. Dr. Evans hesitated, then added, "This caregiver is a little different, but I believe she might be what you need." "What I need?" Lucas almost laughed, as if anyone could give him what he needed, his old life back. 2 miles away, Amelia Harris double-checked the address scribbled on a worn piece of paper. Her hands trembled slightly. The towering Donovan estate loomed before her, an architectural marvel of steel and glass reflecting the cloudless sky. It felt a world away from her tiny 2-bedroom apartment, where she lived with her daughter, Emily. "Mommy, look!" Emily's tiny fingers pointed to the fountain by the driveway, water dancing and shimmering in the sun. Her eyes sparkled with innocent wonder. Amelia managed to smile. "It's beautiful, isn't it, sweetheart?" Emily nodded, her brown curls bouncing like a fairy tale. But Amelia wasn't here for fairy tales. She was here for survival. The last few months had been unforgiving. Late rent notices, dwindling groceries, and the crushing weight of being a single mother after Amelia's father disappeared without a trace. This job, no matter how daunting, was her lifeline. Taking a deep breath, she held Emily's hand and walked to the front door. Before she could knock, the heavy oak door swung open, revealing an older woman with a severe bun and sharp eyes. "You're Amelia Harris?" the woman asked, eyeing her with a mix of skepticism and curiosity. "Yes, ma'am," Amelia replied, trying to sound confident. The woman stepped aside. "I'm Miss Peterson, the housekeeper. Follow me." They walked through hallways adorned with priceless arts and marble floors that gleamed like mirrors. Amelia's cheap sneakers felt out of place, and she clutched Emily's hand tighter. The air inside was cool and eerily quiet, like a museum devoid of life. At last, they stopped outside a door. "Mr. Donovan is inside." Miss Peterson hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He can be difficult. Don't take it personally." Amelia nodded. She was used to difficult. Life itself had been difficult for as long as she could remember. As she stepped into the room, the first thing she noticed was the man by the window. Lucas Donovan sat in his wheelchair, his gaze fixed on the sprawling gardens outside. The sunlight highlighted his chiseled jaw and the tired lines around his eyes. He was younger than she expected, mid-30s, perhaps, and still devastatingly handsome despite the weariness etched into his features. "Mr. Donovan," Miss Peterson announced, "this is Amelia Harris, your new caregiver." Lucas didn't turn around. "I don't need a caregiver." Amelia took a step forward, her voice steady. "I'm here to help, Mr. Donovan." He finally turned his head, and their eyes met. His were a cold, steely blue, hardened by pain and resignation. Amelia felt a shiver, but she stood her ground. "Do you know what you signed up for?" he asked, his voice low and edged with bitterness. "This isn't some charity case." "I'm not here for charity," she said softly. "I'm here because I need this job, and because you need someone who won't give up on you." A flicker of something, surprise, maybe, crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I'll give you a week," he said dismissively. "Most don't last that long." Amelia squared her shoulders. "I'm not most people." The first few days were an exercise of patience and grit. Lucas's anger was a wall she couldn't penetrate. He refused assistance, snapped at suggestions, and met every attempt at conversations with cold silence. Amelia's back ached, and exhaustion clawed at her, but she refused to break. Emily, with her boundless curiosity, was the one who seemed unaffected by Lucas's aloof demeanor. One afternoon, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny, Emily walked into Lucas's room and asked in her clear, innocent voice, "Why are you sad, Uncle Lucas?" Lucas stared, surprised. "I'm not sad," he replied curtly. Emily tilted her head. "But your eyes are sad." Lucas opened his mouth to say something but then closed it again. He turned away, his jaw clenched. Amelia's heart clenched. "Come on, Emily. Let Mr. Lucas rest." But Emily didn't move. She stepped closer to Lucas, her small hands reaching out to touch his. "It's okay. Mommy says that sometimes hugs make people feel better." Lucas's eyes widened. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then slowly, hesitatingly, he extended his hand and let Emily's tiny fingers wrap around his. Something cracked in his expression, a fissure in his fortress of his pain. Amelia swallowed the lump in her throat. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt monumental. Later that evening, as Amelia prepared to leave, Lucas spoke, his voice low. "You really think you can change anything?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I'm not going to stop trying." He nodded, a ghost of a smile tugging at his lips. "We'll see." As she turned to leave, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. A door long sealed shut was creaking open. But neither of them knew that the real test was yet to come, a moment that would force them to confront their deepest fears and the possibility of hope. The days blurred together in a monotonous rhythm of routines and resistance. Lucas Donovan's world was still defined by the cold steel of his wheelchair and the sterile air of his mansion. Amelia Harris showed up each morning without fail, her voice calm and determined despite his attempts to push her away. Yet every evening when she left, a nagging sense of emptiness settled over her. The silence in the house was heavier now, for reasons he didn't care to examine too closely. He missed the faint sounds of her footsteps, the quiet timbre of her voice, and even the soft hum of Emily's little songs. It was on Tuesday afternoon that Lucas finally broke his silence. "You're stubborn," he muttered as Amelia adjusted the current. He muttered as Amelia adjusted the cushions behind his back. She didn't look up. "I've been called worse." He smirked, though faintly. "Why do you keep coming back? Most people would have quit by now." Amelia paused, her hands stilling for a brief moment. "Because giving up isn't an option for me." Lucas's eyes flickered with curiosity. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the faint creases on her forehead, lines carved by worry and exhaustion. There was something deeper beneath her calm exterior, something forged in hardship. "Emily's father?" Lucas asked, surprising himself with the question. Amelia's jaw tightened slightly. "Gone. He disappeared when she was barely a year old. Couldn't handle the responsibility." She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "I decided I'd handle it for both of us." Lucas's throat tightened, the familiar ache of abandonment clawing at his insides. He had spent most of his life avoiding attachments, dismissing love as a weakness. Yet here was a woman who had been abandoned in the worst way and still managed to hold herself together. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words foreign on his tongue. Amelia shrugged. "Don't be. It taught me to fight. For Emily, for myself." Her eyes softened. "And maybe, just maybe, I can teach someone else to fight too." Lucas looked away, his gaze fixed on the rain streaming down the window pane. He wanted to believe her. He believed that fighting wasn't pointless, but hope was a dangerous thing. It had a habit of slipping through your fingers, leaving you colder than before. That evening, Amelia stayed longer than usual. Emily was in the corner, coloring quietly. The room was bathed in a warm glow of the fading sunset, casting long shadows across the floor. "Do you want to try something new?" Amelia asked, her voice gentle but firm. Lucas arched an eyebrow. New? I read about a technique that combines hydrotherapy with assisted stretching, she explained. It might help with your muscle stiffness. It could also improve circulation. He knew what she was really saying. It might help you walk again. The words hung unspoken between them, heavy with fragile hope. Lucas clenched his fist, his knuckles white against the armrest of his wheelchair. The thought of hope felt like a cruel joke, but a tiny voice inside him, a whisper he had tried to silence, urged him to say yes. Fine, he said finally, his voice gruff. Let's try. A small smile curved Amelia's lips. It was the first time he had agreed to anything beyond the basic routine. Progress, no matter how small, was still progress. The pool in the Donovan estate was a pristine marvel of marble and crystal clear water, rarely used since the accident. The steam rose in gentle swirls, and the soft hum of the water heaters filled the silence. Amelia helped Lucas into the water, her hands firm yet careful. He felt the warmth of the water envelop him, a strange mix of comfort and vulnerability. For the first time in months, he wasn't confined to the rigid boundaries of his chair. Relax, Amelia murmured. Trust me. He let out a shaky breath, the tensions in his shoulders easing slightly. Amelia guided his legs through gentle stretches, her hands supporting and encouraging him. The water lightened the burden of his limbs, and for a fleeting moment, he felt almost normal. You're doing great, she whispered, her eyes meeting his. He didn't reply, but something in his chest tightened. He felt exposed in a way he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. There was no wall between them here, just raw, unfiltered reality. As she moved around him, her fingers accidentally brushed his hand. A jolt of electricity shot through him, unexpected and intense. He saw her eyes widen, her cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't pull away. Neither did he. Later that night, after Amelia and Emily had left, Lucas found himself staring at his reflection in the mirror. His legs, still and uncooperative, mocked him. For the first time, the image didn't just fill him with anger. It filled him with determination. Her words echoed in his mind. Trust me. Could he let someone in after years of keeping everyone out? The thought terrified him more than the paralysis ever had. The following morning, as Amelia wheeled Lucas into the living room, they were greeted by the sound of laughter. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, giggling at the animated characters on TV. The pure, uninhibited joy on her face was a stark contrast to the shadows in Lucas's life. You know, Lucas said softly, I don't remember the last time I laughed like that. Amelia's eyes flicked to him, her expressions a mix of sadness and hope. You can, it's still possible. Maybe, he admitted. I just don't know how. Emily, oblivious to their conversation, turned and beamed at Lucas. Want to watch me, Mr. Lucas? He hesitated. The idea of joining such a simple, innocent activity felt alien. But then Amelia's hands brushed his shoulders, grounding him. Why not? She whispered. He nodded slowly. Amelia helped him onto the couch, his body awkward and rigid. But as he settled beside Emily, the little girl's warmth seemed to seep into his bones. Emily handed him a stuffed bunny, her smile bright. Now you're ready. A strangled laugh escaped him, unexpected and rare. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. That night, as Amelia tucked Emily into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting. Lucas's laughter, however, felt brief, felt like a crack in the walls, but he had built around himself. She lingered by the doorway, watching Emily's steady breathing. Her heart swelled with love and fear. She had taken this job out of necessity, but it was becoming more than that. Lucas wasn't just a patient anymore. He was a man trapped by his own pain, reaching for something he couldn't quite grasp. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a text from an unknown number. You think you can change him, Amelia? People like Lucas don't change. Be careful. Her blood ran cold. Who could know about her work here? And why did it feel like a threat? Her hands shook as she turned off the phone, a sense of dread settling in her stomach. Someone didn't want her here, and she was about to find out why. The text lingered in Amelia's mind like a dark cloud. Each morning as she arrived at the Donovans' estate, a whisper of dread curled in her stomach. Someone was watching her. Someone who didn't believe in second chances for Lucas, or perhaps her. She deleted the message, but its memory was stubborn. Lucas, however, had changed. He still carried his cynicism like armor, but cracks were forming. He allowed Amelia to stretch his legs in the pool. He tolerated Emily's laughter and even smiled when she handed him her stuffed bunny for good luck. These were tiny steps, fragile as glass, but each one felt monumental. "Are you ready?" Amelia asked one afternoon as they prepared for another hydrotherapy session. Lucas exhaled, his jaw set. "As ready as I can be." She wheeled him to the edge of the pool, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. The smell of chlorine hung in the air, familiar now. Lucas slid into the warm water with Amelia's help, the liquid cradling his unresponsive legs. He winced, his muscles stiffening. "Easy," Amelia said softly. "Breathe." He took a shaky breath, his eyes closing. Amelia moved behind him, her hands supporting his back as she began the stretches. He felt vulnerable, exposed, but her hands were steady, her touch careful. "Amelia," he murmured, "why do you believe in this so much?" She paused. The question hung between them. "Because I've seen what happens when you give up," she whispered, "and I refuse to let that happen to you." Lucas opened his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt a sliver of warmth that wasn't from the water. It was hope, tentative but real. Suddenly, a sharp noise echoed through the pool area, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Amelia's head whipped around. One of the large windows by the pool had a spiderweb crack spreading across it. A cold gust of air seeped in. Her heart pounded. What the hell was that? Lucas's voice was tense, his body stiffening. Amelia's mind raced. Was this a coincidence, or was it connected to the ominous text message? "I don't know," she stammered, trying to mask the fear in her voice. "Stay here. I'll check it out." She climbed up the pool, her wet feet squeaking against the tiles. The cracked window had a small hole at its center. Something had been thrown. A rock, maybe. Amelia glanced around, but the grounds outside were empty. The wind rustled the bushes, but there was no sign of anyone. She turned back to Lucas, her heart hammering. "I think someone accidentally broke the glass." His eyes narrowed. She forced a smile. "It's fine. Let's finish the session." That evening, Lucas called for Amelia. "I want to talk to you about what happened today," he said, his voice firm. She hesitated. "Lucas, it's nothing. I don't want you to worry." "I'm not worried," he shot back. "Don't lie to me, Amelia. Someone is threatening you, aren't they?" She looked away, her hands twisting together. "It's probably just someone who doesn't want me here. Maybe they think I'm taking advantage of you." He scoffed. "Anyone who knows me knows I don't let people take advantage of me." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "Maybe someone doesn't want you to get better." The words hung heavy in the air. Lucas's jaw clenched. The idea that someone would sabotage his progress, that they would threaten Amelia and Emily, ignited a fury he hadn't felt since the accident. "I'm going to find out who's behind this," he vowed. Amelia shook her head. "You need to focus on your recovery, Lucas. Don't get caught in—" "No." His voice was steel. "I've spent months feeling powerless. I refuse to let someone take control of my life again." Amelia's met his gaze, her eyes glistening. She wanted to protect him, to shield him from whatever darkness was lurking. But maybe, just maybe, he needed to fight for himself too. Despite the unease, Amelia continued their sessions, though fear loomed like a shadow over her every step. One evening, as she helped Lucas into bed, he gently caught her wrist. "Stay tonight," he said. "I don't want you driving home alone." Her breath caught. "Lucas, I can't impose." "It's not an imposition," he insisted. "Please." The vulnerability in his eyes cracked her resolve. "Okay," she whispered. She lay in the guest room, unfamiliar blankets weighing heavily on her. Sleep eluded her. The house was too quiet, the silence oppressive with unspoken threats. A creaking noise startled her awake. Her heart leaped to her throat. Footsteps. She slipped out of bed, her pulse pounding. The hallway was dark, shadows stretching like claws. She crept towards Lucas's room, her bare feet soundless on the cold floor. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. A figure stood by Lucas's bed, half shrouded in darkness. "Lucas!" she cried. The figure spun around, and moonlight fell on their face. It was Miss Peterson, her eyes gleamed of malice. "You should have stayed away, Amelia," Miss Peterson snarled. "What are you doing?" Amelia's voice shook. Miss Peterson sneered. "Protecting what's mine. He doesn't need you. He doesn't need anyone." Lucas stared, his eyes fluttering open. "What's going on?" he mumbled. "Miss Peterson, stop!" Amelia lunged forward, but the housekeeper pulled a syringe filled with a clear liquid from her pocket. "I won't let you ruin everything," Miss Peterson hissed. Amelia grabbed a lamp from the nightstand and swung it. The glass shattered as it connected with Miss Peterson's shoulder. She cried out, the syringe clattering to the floor. Lucas's eyes widened in horror. "Amelia!" Miss Peterson stumbled, her face twisting in fury. "You think you've won? This isn't over." She bolted from the room, disappearing into the shadows. Amelia's chest heaved. Lucas reached for her hand, his fingers trembling. "Are you okay?" he rasped. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We need to call the police." He swallowed hard. "Amelia, thank you." For a moment, they held each other's gaze, the terror slowly ebbing into a fragile sense of safety. The police arrived, their flashing lights casting eerie shadows over the Donovan estate. Officers combed the ground, but Miss Peterson had vanished. Amelia held Emily close, the little girl's wide eyes filled with confusion. Lucas sat beside them, his face pale with resolute. "She'll be caught," he promised. "She won't hurt you again." Amelia's eyes searched his. "And what about you, Lucas? Will you be okay?" He took her hand, his grip firm. "I'm done hiding. I'm done being afraid." For the first time since the accident, the weight on his chest felt lighter. He wasn't alone anymore. Amelia and Emily had fought for him. Now it was his turn to fight for them. The days following, the police continued their investigation. Miss Peterson was eventually arrested after authorities uncovered evidence to her plot to harm Lucas in an attempt to seize the Donovan's family wealth. Specifically, it was revealed that she had secretly manipulated Lucas's medical records and medications to worsen his condition, all while pretending to care for him. With the truth exposed, she was taken into custody, and Lucas and Amelia were finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing the threat had ended. One crisp morning, Amelia found him in the study, staring out the window with an unfamiliar expression. Determination. "Good morning," she greeted softly, setting a cup of coffee on his desk. He turned his gaze to meet hers. "Morning." There was a pause, heavy with unspoken words. Lucas glanced down at his legs, then back up at her. "I want to try standing today." Amelia's breath caught. "I know it might not work," he said quickly, "but I want to try. I need to try." A rush of pride and fear surged through her. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it." The physical therapy room smelled faintly of disinfectant, the hum of machines filling the air. Sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the floor in gold and amber hues. Lucas sat in his wheelchair, his hands clenched around the armrests. Amelia knelt beside him, her eyes steady and warm. "We'll take it slow," she said. He nodded, his jaw tight. "I'm ready." She wrapped an arm around his waist, supporting him. "On 3. 1, 2, 3. He pushed with his arms, his muscles screaming in protest. His legs wobbled, weak and unfamiliar. Pain lanced through his body, sharp and relentless. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but he gritted his teeth and fought. For a split second, his weight shifted, and his legs bore him up. He was standing. The world tilted, the air rushed out of his lungs. Then, his knees buckled, and he collapsed back into the chair. "No!" The word tore from his throat, raw and broken. Amelia grabbed his hands, her fingers firm. "Lucas, you did it! You stood up!" He shook his head, shame and frustration darkening his eyes. "It doesn't matter. I couldn't hold it. It does matter," she interrupted fiercely. "You took a step. That's what matters. You fought. You didn't give up." His chest heaved, emotions swirling dangerously close to the surface. He wanted to scream, to cry, to disappear, but Amelia's gaze held him steady, anchoring him. You're not alone in this, she whispered. I'm right here. Something inside him cracked. The walls he had built around his heart began to crumble. Why? He asked, his voice barely audible. Why do you care so much? She smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. Because I see you, Lucas, the real you, and I believe in him. He closed his eyes, his fingers tightening around hers. For the first time in months, the darkness receded, just a little. That night, the estate was quiet. Amelia sat on the balcony outside her room, the cool night air brushing her cheeks. The stars glittered above, distant and timeless. A soft knock on the door made her turn. Lucas wheeled into the room, his eyes shadowed but hopeful. Couldn't sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Too many thoughts. He hesitated, then wheeled closer. Thank you, Amelia, for everything. She smiled, her heart swelling. You don't have to thank me. I do, he said, his voice rough. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? She asked softly. Hope. Her breath caught. The vulnerability in his eyes, the raw sincerity, made her heart ache. She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek. You give me hope too, Lucas. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing for a moment. The world held its breath. When he opened his eyes, the intensity of his gaze took hers away. I want to try again, he said. To stand, to walk, to live. A tear slid down her cheek. I'll be there with you every step of the way. He leaned forward, his lips hovering near hers. Amelia? She closed the distance, her lips meeting his in a gentle, hesitant kiss. It was a kiss filled with promises, with sharp pain and fragile hope. The world melted away, leaving just the two of them, bound together by something stronger than fear. When they pulled back, their foreheads rested together, their breaths mingling. Whatever happens, she whispered, we'll face it together. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Together. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of progress and setbacks. Lucas pushed himself even harder, his determination a blazing fire. Amelia was by his side every step, her encouragement a steady light in the darkness. And then, one day, it happened. They were in the therapy room, sunlight streaming through the windows. Lucas gripped the parallel bars, his knuckles white. Amelia stood in front of him, her eyes filled with unwavering belief. You can do this, she said softly. He nodded, his jaw tight. One step at a time. He shifted his weight, his muscles trembling. His left foot lifted, hovered, and then landed a few inches ahead. A step. A real, solid step. His chest tightened, a sob threatening to break free. He took another step, and then another. Tears blurred his vision, but he didn't stop. Amelia's hands were on his, steadying him. You're doing it, Lucas. He looked up, his eyes filled with wonder and disbelief. I'm walking. Yes, she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. You are. He took one more step and collapsed into her arms. She held him tight, their hearts pounding together. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, his voice raw. She smiled through her tears. We did it together. That evening, they sat on the balcony, the sunset painting that sky in hues of gold and crimson. Emily played nearby, her laughter a melody in the air. Lucas took Amelia's hands, his fingers lacing with hers. I never thought I'd feel alive again, he said softly. She rested her head on his shoulders. Life has a way of surprising us. He turned to her, his eyes warm and soft. I love you, Amelia. Her heart swelled. I love you too, Lucas. As the sun dipped between the horizon, they held each other. The darkness was no longer something to fear. They had faced it and come out stronger together. And for the first time, their scars felt like beginnings, not endings. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Sending you a big hug and see you in the next story.